Today's gospel reading is from Matthew 13, 31 to 33, and 45 to 52. You will likely recognize it as a continuation of the reading Stephanie shared with you last week. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out his treasure, what is new and what is old. I'm going to be honest with you, parables are not my thing. I have difficulty with them at best and completely miss the point at worst. I've often wondered if I'm lacking in understanding due to my not having had a college education with literature as part of my studies. I've always been a reader, but read more for enjoyment and entertainment. I'm happy to learn as a result of my reading, as long as I'm not required to dissect what I read in order to find the author's real meaning. I've never even had to do a critique, as my high school education was during a 4-year transition between a small high school and the building of a regional school, the result being that I attended high school for a mere 4 hours a day for the entire 4 years. My 3-year nursing career education was intense, but pertained strictly to nursing knowledge, not literature 101. So I have very little background with which to decipher these parables. I'll give you an example of how inept I seem to be at reading into things. Several years ago, I attended a Bible study here at Chaffin, and I don't recall who the leader was at the time, but I clearly recall that he or she drew a picture of a simple stairway, just like this, with figures going up and down. The group was invited to interpret the drawing, and several immediately recognized it as the stairway to heaven, complete with angels floating along the steps. It's a lovely concept, they all agreed. But I was totally taken aback because what I saw was women, and they were lugging supplies up those stairs, and they were definitely heavily burdened. Now, I suppose that might reflect on where I was at the time, but it certainly wasn't what the rest of the people saw in that drawing. As far as the group was concerned, I was a little off the mark. I'd like to think that through the years I've gained enough insight and traveled far enough along my faith journey to dare to share with you what meaning I find in today's gospel reading. But take it from me, you may have a totally different idea. I do like the parable of the mustard seed. It seems like I've heard that story for all my life. I remember my grandmother had a pin, which is now mine, and it has the story of the mustard seed as well as a tiny little seed inside a glass sphere. And I always loved that pin. I can remember her wearing it when I was a small child. In this story, I believe that Jesus is saying that those of us with even the tiniest seed of faith can grow in Christ to become true followers and help spread his love in the world. I also have a note in my Bible that says, as small and insignificant as we are, we can grow in Christ. The example of the yeast, even a small amount, having the potential to expand bread dough is also understandable, especially as I watched my mother make her own bread for many, many years. A little yeast mixed into the dough, and the bread will expand to feed many. A little seed of faith mixed into our lives can grow to feed many souls. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure in a hidden field, and when I read that excerpt, it seems to me that it means that if we give up sin, we can buy into Christianity. The person in the verse says that heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field which someone found and hid, and then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has to buy that field. It's worth selling, giving up the world's plan to believe in Christ and to follow his ways. I won't go any further into these because I can tell I'm getting into mud. I am. Actually, I had not looked at those until I reread them this morning, and I thought, that is speaking to me more than what I had thought. Then at the end, we come to the fish in the nets. There were many fish of all kinds. There were edible fish and bad fish, and the bad were thrown out. And I quote, "So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." That's a visual that to me is pretty awful. The furnace of fire, weeping, gnashing of teeth. It's so awful that it makes me want to run and hide somewhere. Why hide? Because it's frightening. Because I'm afraid of that visual. I don't like it. It scares me, and it's just so much easier to concentrate on the mustard seed and the yeast. But as people have done since the beginning of time, we might want to hide from our fears. Adam and Eve did it. After giving in to temptation, they tried to hide in the garden from God. Hiding is an ancient way to deal with fear and continues today. Max Lucado, who wrote It's Not About Me, a book I highly recommend, by the way, has numerous writings about fear and how we might best come to terms with it. I was surprised to see one of his talks on the internet recently that seemed to support some thoughts that I have had over the past few months regarding the handling of fear in my own life. It is this subject, the facing of fear, that I hope to share with you this morning. While I have no theological training or expertise that gives me license to preach to you, what I think I can do is witness as to how God has been working in my life.